this today. This is Seth Milliken. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Transportation Alliance. And one of the things that we did last year was to kick off a new Experience the Experts digital series where we bring in some of the thought leaders from our industry and ask them questions and give them the opportunity to talk to our stakeholders about current issues and best practices and things of that nature within the transportation industry. So today is the first installment of the 2016 Experience the Experts digital series. Quite a bit has changed since our last webinar, and we're excited about the topic today. Most of us on the call have been following and working towards a long-term transportation bill, which finally passed Congress and was signed by the President late last year. The FAST Act that we'll be talking about today is a 5-year transportation bill, and will be quite a boost to our economy here in Georgia. Our transportation marketplace here in Georgia is going to inject several $100 million of new revenue into our state DOT and their ability to build projects around the state. So we're very happy about that. We're also very happy that in the process of getting a long-term transportation bill passed, Georgia also was able to get a direct influence into the process by getting a member of our congressional delegation back on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Congressman Rob Woodall is from North Fulton and Gwinnett County area and has done a great job both in his service to former Congressman Linder as well as the congressman from that part of our state, and has very quickly made a name for himself as a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. It wasn't too long after he was named to the committee that he was named to the conference committee on the FAST Act and served in that capacity, and then assisted Chairman Schuster with the passage of that through Congress. So today we have 3 panelists. Congressman Woodall is going to kick us off with a brief update on where things are in D.C. and his view from Washington. And then we're going to turn it over to Graham Hill and Tom Lynch, who are partners of ours up at Ice Miller Strategies, and they've been engaged with the Alliance over the last couple of months, helping us work on federal issues, and will be working with us moving forward as we continue to engage with our congressional delegation and then some of our partners in D.C. on federal issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Woodall and let him welcome everyone, and then we'll turn it over to Graham and Tom to let them get into the presentation.
Yeah, Seth, I appreciate that. Welcoming everyone is a good role for me to be in, and I say that from the perspective that we have been able to be more influential in Washington, D.C. on transportation policy because of the work that GTA does, because of all the stakeholder involvement back home, because Georgia has taken on challenges locally that have been avoided nationally. It makes our voice on behalf of the folks back home much stronger. So thank you for everything that you have done and GTA has done to help make us successful. You know, it's been since the late 1990s that you saw a bill, a long-term transportation bill like this passed, and you know, we'll celebrate 5 years now. But the truth is, there's a lot more work to be done. We didn't deal with the revenue side. Yes, this 5-year bill is going to send $6 billion to the state of Georgia. Yes, that's a 10% increase over what was sent to Georgia in the last round. Yes, that's going to make some real difference when paired with the $1 billion that Georgia's putting in. But there is no long-term funding stream, no long-term user fee that was established. That can got kicked down the road, and my great hope is that we will begin the drive to fix that problem, not 5 years from now, not 4 years from now, not 3 years now, but sometime very close to today, and you all can be great partners in that. You know, the FAST Act implemented a lot of changes that we've been trying to do for a long time. Now, I know the policy experts that we have in the car are going to get into the details on this, but I want to highlight some of those things that are near and dear to my heart. For example, the FAST Act requires, it doesn't just allow, but it requires that environmental impact statements and the record of decisions be folded into a single document whenever possible. It ensures that the regulators are generally not able to revive a previously resolved issue to slow down a process. Their deadlines, their new deadlines, 45 days to name every chef that's going to be in the kitchen on a project, 45 days for DOT to decide whether or not the environmental review can proceed, 90 days to put together the comment gathering process for the agencies involved. You all know better than anybody, time is money on these things, and it's not just time is money for the folks who are putting the pavement down and doing the bridge reconstruction. Time is money for my boss, which is the soccer mom heading out across I-85, the parent trying to get to work in the morning, the trucker who's trying to get goods to market. My boss, time is money for them too. Every minute they're sitting in traffic is money out of their pocket, quality gone from their life. They don't want to see these delays. They want to see implementation. I'll go a step further. Bridge repair projects. These are serious safety issues in many cases, and we codify the regulation that exempts a lot of those projects from individual review. If a bridge is in serious condition, some of the burdensome regulations under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act are going to be waived. It just makes too much sense that if you're talking about kids on the school bus or folks taking a ride to soccer practice, getting to work in the morning, those human lives have to be more important than going through some arbitrary federal rule process involving the bird. We don't have to trade one away to do the other. We can solve both. We've got bridges that need fixing, and this bill is going to make it easier to get that done. This happens not in a vacuum. As Seth mentioned, Georgia had been without a voice on the Transportation Committee in the majority since Johnny Isakson left the U.S. House years and years ago. And because of the steps, again, that you all have taken at home, we have been able to really make a lot of influence. It's not just a function of being able to offer amendments there in committee. As Seth mentioned, the chairman reached down to Georgia and said, we need you on the conference committee. We need you sorting out all the difficult questions at the end of the day because you all have been so involved on the front end of the process. That is a partnership. It's a huge bill, the FAST Act, but it's one that we worked on for months and months in public view and through regular order. I'm very proud of that. And we did it together. We did it collaboratively. That collaboration does not stop with the president's signature on the bill. I would argue that collaboration becomes all the more important now. Implementation is going on now. I've already been on the phone with folks at federal DOT, making sure that some of the provisions that we specifically included in there out of the great state of Georgia, dealing with veterans and some trucking issues, making sure that federal DOT is going to follow up on those. It's not enough just to get the law of the land right. We have to get the implementing regulations right. There are too many specifics to report on implementation, but I can tell you that folks are moving full steam ahead on that, and we need you all engaged to help us make sure they get it right. My committee, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee in the House, along with the Senate committees of jurisdiction, met with federal DOT earlier this month to go through some of our preliminary concerns. And oversight of the FAST Act, the oversight of this implementation is going to be a major focus for us, not just for the rest of this year, but for all 5 years of this 5-year plan. I need each and every one of you to follow your subsection of this act, the part that influences you when you see bureaucracy stifling a much-needed reform, or you see an important provision that you know is being stalled or held up. I need you to call me. I need you to reach out to me. I'll give you my information. You can do it on the web if that's easier for you. Woodall.house.gov is my web page, and there's a web form you can fill out there that'll come to me, or you can send me an email, woodall@mail.house.gov, woodall@mail.house.gov. The truth is the majority of the provisions that President Obama signs into law that originate with me in my office come from good ideas from folks back home. You all are the subject matter experts in the real world at getting things done. I am the subject matter expert at taking those ideas and turning them into a legislative product and getting them across the finish line and getting the implementation done right. But it's a partnership, and I need your expertise. Chairman Schuster, if he were on this call today, would ask you himself to be his eyes and ears on the ground. Georgia is developing a reputation across this country for taking on transportation challenges head on. I was with Commissioner McMurray yesterday, and we were talking all about the exciting opportunities that Georgia has, the things that are already going into effect, the way dollars are already flowing out the door. We have a great story to tell. If you will help me to take those successes that we are experiencing back home, pair them with the failures that you are seeing that are the result of poor or bureaucratic administration, we will not just make this the first long-term transportation bill we've had in 20 years. We will make this the best long-term transportation bill, and we will make it the foundation on which we will build a longer-term funding bill in the future, a longer-term certainty with respect to funding, and longer-term partnership in terms of paring back bureaucracy and making sure that we have the stakeholders involved each step of the way. Seth, I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this today. Again, what GTA does makes a difference, not just at home, but it makes a difference 640 miles away in Washington, D.C. I thank you for that.
Well, Congressman, we thank you for your service and appreciate what you do for us, and look forward to continuing our partnership to support your efforts on our behalf, both in Congress and on the T&I committee. So we're grateful for that. Folks, I'm going to turn it over now to Graham Hill and Tom Lynch. Graham and Tom work for us in D.C. And work with us on coordinating with our congressional delegation, as well as making sure that we've got the best resources to provide to our stakeholders in terms of what's going on in Washington, not just with roads and bridges, but also with WRDA and FAA reauthorization and other issues that are important to our stakeholders as well. I'll remind you, if you have questions, we're going to go through those at the end of the broadcast. Please use your question app, so to speak, on the gray sidebar of your interface there. You submit those questions, then we'll go through them at the end of the broadcast. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom and Graham and let you guys take it from there.
Thanks very much, Seth and Lauren, and it's good to hear Congressman Woodall's summary of his great efforts to get this bill into public law. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear, Graham.
Okay, if we can advance that first slide, I'm apparently unable to do that even after our practice session. I apologize for that. Okay, as Congressman Woodall pointed out, this is a 5-year bill that does not directly address the issue of structural deficits for the Highway Trust Fund. And by structural, we mean the difference between the amount of revenue that comes in through the gas tax and other excise taxes and the authorized amount per year. It does, however, close that gap for this 5-year period with a combination of general funds derived from reducing Federal Reserve dividends that are paid in excess of $10 billion and other mechanisms, including the sale of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. On this slide here, you'll see a quick layout of the amounts that Georgia is going to be getting under the new bill for FY16. This notice is an update from just a week ago from Federal Highway Administration. Georgia's total apportionment for the prior fiscal year under MAP 21 was about $1.246 billion. So you can see the increase here across the board. Generally, over the following 4 years, we'll see Georgia go up from this 1.309 next fiscal year to 1.336 with a steady curve up, and in 2020 Georgia will be getting roughly 1.429 billion, assuming that all of the assumptions and variables that are in this calculation stay true. You'll see as we go along here that we have footnoted many of the numbers that are provided as a calculation of what should occur, assuming that all of the variables stay in place. I'll also note here that the Surface Transportation Program, as you see, we've starred that because this bill changed the structure of that program into a block grant program. Most of the set-asides that you all will be familiar with now come out of that, and we'll cover that in the slide here in a minute. We can fast forward or go forward slide. The takedown summary from the block grant program is summarized here on this slide. These are proportional, or at least equatable to the takedowns that would have occurred under MAP 21 from the prior year. There's a certain amount of additional flexibility built into the underlying authority for these programs, but generally speaking, the geographic distribution required for both the sub-allocated apportionments and the set-asides is very much to what occurred when this was all under STB. Next slide. Here is another apportionment update from just a week or so ago for Georgia. This is your UZA, your urbanized area set-asides for these different sized areas. So these are your larger urbanized areas that are above 200,000 and the amounts there that they get, plus the set-aside, and then what the net is. Again, these numbers are not out of line with what was occurring under the prior authorization. They have a proportional increase here, and I would expect that everybody sees those and says, okay, I get that. That's about what I'd expect given the overall increase that the bill provided for STP. Next slide. One of the most important aspects of the program that Congress tends to review when we see a multi-year reauthorization is federal share. In the case of the FAST Act, we generally see that the 80-20 ratio, which has been the historic ratio since T21, stayed in place. There are some individual changes here that are notable, some that we have not put in these slides because there are just too many things to go through. Of particular interest possibly for Georgia is that the Appalachian Development Highway System was authorized through 2050, and that another change allows for a federal share of 100% up to 100% on certain ADHS facilities. The Section 116 of MAP 21, which did authorize a increased share up to 100% or 90% depending on the case for certain innovative freight programs, was rescinded, was struck from the law, but most of what was incentivized there was added back in the form of the new apportioned freight program, which we'll get to in just a minute. I would also point out here the innovative project delivery method flexibilities that were increased here, with up to 100% federal share being authorized under certain circumstances in the NHPP and the block program. So on balance, I think we see that this bill maintained general federal share expectations while making some adjustments that are meant to incentivize improvements in facility connections for freight, better planning, trying to improve the utility of the facility plans under your STIP. Next slide. The CMAQ program, which is also was in the law prior to FAST Act, this was actually originally authorized in T21. Over the years, CMAQ has taken a while to kind of get up where states are able to obligate all of the budget authority there. This has been a place where we've seen unobligated balances occur year over year. There were some changes here, trying to increase the amount of set aside under SPR. Certain adjustments here for flexibility purposes that correspond to changes in the PM 2.5 that was updated under the Clean Air Act. A little bit of transfer flexibility was also included in this program. Generally speaking, CMAQ and its availability for projects, particularly in attainment areas, the flexibility there was increased. We'll go to the next slide. Here are some other changes that we saw, again, linked mostly to changes in Clean Air Act requirements that you'll see under both 49 and 23, both of those titles. The vehicle to infrastructure communications equipment has been a big place of emphasis. This originally came out of T21 and then Safe TLU emphasis on improving the technology connections to try to improve traffic flow and mitigate congestion. The rest of this is additional flexibility here, as you'll see there under that last eligible uses for CMAQ. We've added they added diesel retrofit and some other emission-oriented eligibilities, which should help states obligate these CMAQ funds more effectively and not accumulate balances. Next slide. Another program that was already in the law that was continued under FAST Act is what we call HSIP, the safety program. It continues generally with the focus that it had before, which is obviously to improve safety. Some additional flexibilities were put in there. We'll go to the next slide and get into some of that. So the general arc was maintained. The VII, vehicle infrastructure integration, improved crosswalks and these other activities that you see here under physical infrastructure and roadway improvements, sort of broadening the aperture on eligible activities under HSIP to address a lot of what DOTs and MPOs are encountering from a safety point of view is a practical matter on the ground. So we view all of these as meritorious, nothing particularly controversial there or remarkable. It's just practical improvements for safety. Next slide. Metropolitan planning, another important program under Section 134 and 135 that's been in the law for some time. We saw increases in funding here, which allow MPOs to do their job more effectively and address issues within planning. When we get to some environmental slides, one thing that you'll see is that this bill is trying to tie activities that occur in planning and reviews and studies that occur there and give them standing in the NEPA process. Part of the goal there then is to provide adequate funding upstream in the MPO along with authority there to conduct and establish the kind of data and findings needed that can be valid and legitimate to speed up the NEPA process once the project moves into that phase under a 112 agreement. Next slide. Some of the more notable policy changes that we saw in this bill, there are others, but from our point of view, these are probably the ones that may get some people's attention. The configuration and selection of MPO officials has always been a somewhat controversial or at least a tense issue. There were some changes made to that in the FAST Act. The authority of planning officials here and The issues that you have to address from an MPO point of view in your TIP have been amended. Again, the scope of the planning process here has been broadened in part to better align the activities that surround a project selection with expected NEPA activities and needed insight once the project gets into NEPA. Obviously, stormwater impacts have grown in significance and deteriorated over the last 7, 8, 10 years, and FAST Act made some changes recognizing that. From our point of view, these are not surprising changes. We don't expect them to cause any kind of delay. In fact, they were established here to do just the reverse, to try to. Next slide. There were changes also, we'll get to also in a minute, concerning what we call enhancement activities, which are now transportation alternatives that used to be under the TAP program, so-called under MAP 21. Try to increase the participation of parties within the planning process to their concerns was another amendment made. The idea here is to try and address everything that could be controversial or lead to delay under NEPA in the planning process. So you're trying to front load attention and scrutiny up in the planning process. As they say, you go slow to go fast. That axiom is partly applicable here. Attention to congestion management and the amount of time that MPOs put towards a transportation management plan that addresses congestion is an emphasis that first began in Safe TLU, continued under MAP 21, and we see amendments here in the law, again Congress emphasizing MPOs that they must pay attention to the impacts of projects on mitigating congestion. Not just building roads, but optimizing the use of new facilities as they're integrated into current facilities to reduce congestion. Next slide. Another program that's been in the law for some time, the Railway Highway Crossing Program. Again, this is a safety program. It is a set-aside from HSIP. Not any particularly notable or remarkable changes here. We have slightly increased funding. The set-aside issues here and the transfer flexibility are all consistent with other strategic goals in the bill. The prior program eligibilities stay in place. This also, they did make an attempt to improve the ability of localities to relocate some of these crossings and eliminate the issue of blocked crossing from idle trains you see down there. This is another, we expect to see improvements in the reduction of the number of highway grade crossings, which historically has been the best way to improve safety at a rail highway crossing, is just to eliminate the thing altogether at grade. Next slide. NHPP is another program continued from MAP 21. The increases here that you'll see are, those are total numbers. They're at the top. Again, it's a calculation. Most of what occurred in MAP 21, which is where this program was established, is continued under FAST Act. No particularly remarkable redesign or restructuring of the program. More improvements at the margins, trying to improve the impact of NHPP obligations on NHS infrastructure. There's some additional flexibilities built in there that we mentioned. Let's go to the next slide. Some of the more notable improvements there we've listed here. This asset management plan concept and performance measures. both of which were emphasized in the case of performance measures established in MAP 21, and improvements here for the trying to get more bridges and the project development phase of bridge improvements streamlined so that state DOTs can get more bridges done faster. Next slide. This is a program redesign that did occur in FAST Act. I say redesign in the sense that it changed the surface transportation program, which had been in the law for many years, into a block grant program. The set-asides, as I mentioned a minute ago, that we all used to see in other programs are now ensconced here out of the STBG. Most of the eligibilities and activities that in program characteristics under STP were continued under STBG, but strictly speaking, this is a new program. There are some additional flexibilities built in here, and we'll review a couple of those here under the next slide. So as we've noted here, those STP eligibilities that we saw in 133 are continued. Most of those activities there that are listed are things that you could do under STP. The additional flexibility here was provided to allow states to use STP, the block grant funding, across a broader array of projects than even it was under STP. You see the vehicle, the infrastructure, communication equipment, and you may have noticed that that appears on basically every slide here discussing an amendment to one of the programs. That was across the board something emphasized in the FAST Act. Next slide. Transportation, these have been in the law in one form or another under different names for a while. As we point out, the TAP program under MAP 21 was removed from the law, and basically what we now have is transportation alternatives straight up under the block program. So each state is going to get a total, a piece of the national total, and they can proceed with more flexibility than they did under prior laws for purposes of these alternatives. It's quite broad eligibility. Many of the things that you initially thought of as a transportation enhancement or activities that were eligible previously under TAP are continued here. As we see there, this is the pedestrian, bicycles, rec trails, safe routes to schools, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. These are some additional changes that were made concerning the issues of suballocations under the surface transportation block grant. Generally, what we see here is an increase in the concept of local control, at least with the amount of geographically distributed expenditure of these TAs. This has been a phenomenon that's been underway up here probably for the last 15 years with efforts at the MPO and local level to increase the amount of suballocation and other funding that is required to be spent in either smaller UZAs or at the behest of locals. This is a continuation of that trend. I'd expect to see that continue here in the next reauthorization when we get to that in 5 years. Next slide. So the TAP activities that we saw under MAP 21 continue here. The reporting backup has been emphasized a little bit more. The Federal Highway Administration has got a somewhat identical role as previously. Most of what we're summarizing here is consistent with the prior slide. Next slide. So here is the big new shiny apportion program that the FAST Act put into law. Over the last 15 years or longer, Congress has been struggling to find a way to incentivize more efficient freight movement. In Save TLU and MAP 21, there were efforts made in that direction, and conversations in both authorizations occurred about dedicating funding for very specific freight improvements. Problem has been that when you do that, you're removing flexibility at a state level for a state DOT for their apportion funds and stovepiping a certain amount of money into a very specific set of criteria project. But in this act, this has occurred. We finally see now a specific program with specific apportionments for freight improvements. The list here of activities won't surprise you given the name of the program. The bottom line is that investments in infrastructure and operational improvements that are specifically focused on improving freight movements is the point of this program. So all the states are going to get an apportionment here, and they're going to have to obligate new budget authority under this program for these activities. Now, the last time we saw a whole brand new apportion program, which was in CMAQ back in T21, it took a while for states to get projects in the pipeline to start obligating them under the new authority. I suspect this time we will not see those kinds of delays. Most states on their STIP have got projects that are focused on freight. I think you'll see those funded in many cases under this new program, and so you won't see a buildup of unobligated balances under this apportion program. And then states will, of course, start to specifically design projects under this authority as we move forward. Next slide. So these are more eligible activity characteristics. It's pretty broad. These, in many ways, reflect some of the STP baseline eligibilities. And the difference here is that those activities are eligible, but on a project that's specifically improving freight movement. So most of what you'll see here, and particularly in terms of upstream activities, or basic construction, reconstruction, rehab, those project development and project delivery eligibilities are included here in the NHFP. Next slide. This is a continuation of these eligibilities. I will point out one area here that broke some new ground that's very innovative, and that's about midway down on this slide, which is intelligent transportation systems that would increase truck freight. So basically what they're saying is that they're expanding the concept of what ITS is from what it was under law before the FAST Act. So now ITS facilities can be conveyances for freight themselves, as opposed to a optimization technology that improves the use of a facility. ITS now can be, under this program itself, a kind of new mode of transportation for purposes of moving freight. That's a very innovative step out on the part of the committees, and could bring some projects that are extremely innovative and solve some of these freight bottlenecks, particularly at ports of entry that we've seen at ports around the country. And it's just a remarkable move on the part of the committees. Next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Tom now to discuss transit.
Okay. To move into, going the wrong way. To move into discussing transit, as is noted in the slide, there is a considerable amount of money authorized for the 5 years of the bill. It marks a large increase overall, and most of the increase occurs in the first year. And much of the increase actually also, for instance, goes to bus funding. A point that I would make, however, is that you need to bear in mind that what is authorized is not necessarily the same as what is guaranteed. The transit program operates a little bit differently than the highways program operates, because the transit program relies upon 80% of its funding being guaranteed through the Highway Trust Fund, which is the mechanism for funding highways, roads, bridges, tunnels, everything else, as well as transit. And the remaining portion of the overall funding comes from the general fund, the income tax funded general fund. When Congressman Woodall referred earlier to the lack of a long-term funding certainty, the Highway Trust Fund is the entity that he was describing that still faces a chronic cash shortfall, and we'll discuss that in greater detail in a little bit. But just understand that the difference between how transit actually makes authorized levels, or puts forth authorized levels for what would be ideal amounts to spend, and what actually is the amount that is guaranteed under law on an annual basis. And you can see from this slide that there is a discrepancy in the total amount. The two charts basically rise pretty much in parallel without it actually, however, being the identical number. This slide notes from the Federal Transit Administration where all of the different portions of money will go to in the transit program. The three largest areas are the urbanized area formula, the state of good repair formula, and the capital investments grants. Another key one is the rural area formula, but there are still, in addition to that, a great number of smaller programs designed to, for instance, provide services for the seniors and the disabled. The bus and bus facilities formula program, there's kind of a reinstatement of a discretionary program for bus grants and that kind of stuff as well. Georgia's apportionment, and this is where Graham used the phrase apportionment. Georgia's apportionment for each year in total amounts is noted here. You'll note that it's an increase from the previous fiscal year. The thing to remember about the program is it operates on a number of different funding buckets. Apportionments are the formula amounts that you're guaranteed in advance. In addition to that, however, there will be things like competitive grants. And now, the computer is freezing. Among the programs that are significant, I noted for you the Urbanized Formula Grants Program. It exists, for instance, to be able to address transit typically in populations that exceed 50,000. In fact, often in populations that exceed 200,000. A key change in this year's law will be the prohibition on receiving transit money for operating assistance in areas of more than 200,000 is changed in order to take into account that you could work out, for instance, multiple buses to enter into an operating agreement whereby they could receive funding for operations. There's also a change in law about the demand response transit in urbanized areas which exceed 200,000. Demand response transit, I don't believe I could find any that Georgia operates, but where it exists, it's, for instance, to provide scheduled transportation, not for an emergency situation, for the elderly or the infirmed or somebody who has a need, and that money will also be made available for operating purposes as a result of this law. The rural area formula, which is not nearly as big as the urbanized area formula, but you'll note that there is an increase rising up to, about 2/3 of $1 billion in 2020. That does allow, for instance, for capital costs such as the purchase of buses or upgrade of buses in order to be able to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It allows for things like the operating costs. What does it cost to operate a bus? What does it cost to operate the bus station? It allows for you to be able to enter into service agreements with private providers. It's not like every locale will operate their own buses. The next program to note is the State of Good Repair grants. State of Good Repair is a term of art that the U.S. Department of Transportation likes to rely upon, and it is to make sure that money goes into maintaining existing infrastructure at satisfactory levels rather than allowing great deterioration where ultimately you'll have to spend more going forward. And noted there are the different things on which you can spend state of good repair grant money. Note that it's for facilities that are at least 7 years old. You can't just immediately start spending money on something a year after you put it in place. The total funding amount rises up to $2.5 billion for fiscal year 2016, the year which we are currently in fiscally. That marks an increase over fiscal year 2015, where it was $2 billion, and it rises again on an annual basis to get to $2.7 billion for fiscal year 2020. Additionally, flexibility has been added in for the recipients to be able to eventually comply with the purposes of it, which is the state of good repair. One of the largest areas is the fixed guideway capital investment grants. This, for instance, covers things like the MARTA in Atlanta. It would potentially cover things like any extensions to Alpharetta or Lithonia that you're contemplating. Know that this is an example of the point that we were trying to stress earlier, where there is a distinction between what is authorized and what is guaranteed. There is an increase authorized for this program, rising up to as much as $2.3 billion in the final year of the FAST Act. But the money is all coming out of what's called the general fund, the income tax-backed portion of the U.S. Treasury, as opposed to the Highway Trust Fund, which is the portion of the, for instance, user fee related to the purchase of gasoline or diesel fuel that goes to the dedicated use of infrastructure development. The reason that's significant is because there is no assurance that on an annual basis Congress will put as much money into this program as Congress has authorized this program to receive. And as a case in point, the appropriations process, which is the annual spending process that Congress undertakes in order to be able to fund each different federal agency and federal policies, does not put as much money toward this program within the transit program as is authorized. There is a distinction where the authorization exceeds by $125 million the actual amount of money that's available. Another thing to note is the full funding agreements that a recipient enters into in order to be able to receive money for this program. There is a change in law put forth in this bill that would lower the amount in a new start that an area can receive in federal money down to 60%. However, as a caveat to that, understand as well that you can still increase that number back up to 80% by drawing upon other federal money, other federal buckets of money. Finally, as noted on here, in an effort to try to encourage public-private partnershiping, there is going to be a new program, a pilot program, where FTA, Federal Transit Administration, is seeking 8 projects where the funding levels would require no more than 25% of the federal investment. And what they're seeking is a range of projects here, whether it would be something like fixed rail investment, or if it would be bus facilities, it would be small starts. As an example, they'd like to have a range, but they'd like to use this as a means of gauging going forward what is the opportunity to be able to rely upon more than just federal public money if they can encourage private investment. As noted earlier, one of the areas that saw a significant increase in the funding level is the buses and bus facilities program. And most of the increase occurs in the first year. What's also noteworthy is that recipients can be able to pool funds, and you can have basically multiple recipients in one operating agreement, bringing in a larger amount of money for an area than perhaps would have been possible for each of them individually to seek to do. The bus and bus facility discretionary grant program is really a twist on a previous program that used to exist. As noted here, there are some numbers. There is an intent to try to encourage low emission buses. There is an effort to try to make sure that rural areas don't get excluded. There's an effort to try to make sure that no one area gets all of the money, for instance, in a state. There is a national distribution of about $91 million, and within that, Georgia is guaranteed to receive $1.75 million, which I realize is not a very large number. That's the pro rata share within the total national distribution, but there is still more money obviously available within the broader program. In addition, there's an effort to improve the coordinated access and mobility program in order to be able to make it more flexible. Where previously under that program you had to have a designated recipient for the money or the state, now you could, for instance, even have a local transit agency be eligible to directly receive the federal funding. And as noted at the end, there is still an effort to further push low emission or no emission buses, including in the research process. As with the highways process, where there is a planning effort, the transit process also includes a planning effort with a specific focus on resilience for when you're dealing with things like hurricanes, tornadoes, that kind of stuff. The administration pushed and really wanted to get that in. What's also noteworthy that Congress really wanted to get in is to do a better job making sure that all of the appropriate interested stakeholders in the metropolitan planning process are included in the discussions, rather than the complaint that is frequently heard, which is that we tried to participate but our voices got zeroed out. So under law now, Congress is insisting that metropolitan planning organizations will have to take into account the different forms of interested stakeholders as noted here. As with the highway program, where there's a focus on safety, there is one as well for the Federal Transit Administration, but historically the Federal Transit Administration has not had the same kind of individual safety oversight that the Federal Highway Administration has had. Some high-profile transit problems, including right here in Washington, D.C., with a couple of deaths, have encouraged or pretty much compelled Congress to require the Federal Transit Administration to look at whether or not there need to be federal standards for the operation of transit systems. DOT has to undertake a review, actually, and then report on the matter. Among the other things that are key, there's been a long-running discussion going back to at least 2008 for the installation of positive train control, which is a form of an automatic kill switch on a train. If a driver or an engineer of a train should suffer some form of an episode, a medical episode, or is asleep, or is sending a text message, or any other inappropriate conduct while they're supposed to be running the train, this form of an automatic kill switch would override everything in order to make certain that the train would come to a stop. This really comes out of a passenger rail accident that occurred in Los Angeles in 2008, in which 28 people were killed, and the engineer was found to have been sending text messages rather than paying attention to his job. Within what is now provided in law, it's actually $199 million is set aside for transit systems to be able to install positive train control and have that kind of automatic oversight. A couple of other kinds of things. I don't mean to reduce them to just cats and dogs by calling them other, but they are just drawn from various different parts of the bill. One would be the transit-oriented development projects, where an area tries to set up the idea of, say, having transit systems and an intermodal kind of a center, and then you build up housing around it for the work-life balance. You guys have had a number of examples of that, like around the Piedmont Station and that kind of stuff in MARTA. There's an effort to encourage that by making those projects eligible for the Transportation Infrastructure Financing Innovation Act and the Railroad Rehabilitation Infrastructure Financing, which are two forms of federal lending programs where the federal government subrogates its interests in order to encourage private investment. And a project sponsor will borrow money from the federal government, and ideally as well from private industry, in order to be able to more quickly and with greater pools of cash undertake a program or undertake a project. Another note that what constitutes a small start, the federal permissible number now goes up to $300 million, bearing in mind that you can have as much as 80% federal funding in that form of a full funding agreement, especially because you could draw from multiple buckets. Pivoting a little bit here, this is the first time that Congress addressed Amtrak and passenger rail, which are not always one and the same, in what is historically always described as a highway bill, but recognizing the increasing multimodal nature of this surface transportation bill, there is now inclusion of Amtrak and other operating systems. One of the things is to have pulled the Northeast Corridor, which is that Washington, D.C. up to Boston connection, which is the most successful portion within Amtrak. It will now operate under its own separate budget. The national network, which is the rest of the country, will receive $5.5 billion over the life of this bill for grants made through Federal Railroad Administration. There is money set aside for the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, which would be a new grant program that would fund, among other things, as I noted, PTC, Positive Train Control. It would fund the kinds of rail highway grade crossings that Graham described. There's a set aside for rural areas, but what's important to note about this, and I would tie it back to the previous discussions on the guaranteed funding versus the authorized funding, this is what is authorized under law. This is not what is necessarily guaranteed under law. On an annual basis, Congress will have to decide if it wants to put money toward this. Pivoting again to discuss motor carrier safety, buses and trucks out on the road. The Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program, MCSAP, whereby the federal funding goes to, for instance, roadside inspections, among other things. FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, sent out notice on January 16th in accordance with what the new FAST Act law requires it to do in order to form a working group that will discuss the allocation formula and how each state receives funding under the MCSAP program. There's also a restructuring in general of the MCSAP grants because a number of different programs are being combined into MCSAP rather than standing alone on their own. So the BEG program, the PRISM program, that kind of stuff. In order that you could pursue that in greater detail if you need to, and not to tie this discussion up further, what's on there are the links to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration website levels so you could be able, or website for authorization levels and things like that, so you could be able to see this discussion and even actually see the specific letter that the FMCSA sent out in January. A key thing regarding FMCSA was a concern for the Compliance, Safety, and Accountability Program, where public information is posted about, for instance, trucking companies, and if the data is faulty regarding accidents and why accidents occurred, if somebody drives drunk and plows into the truck, for instance, should that information get posted publicly where it would appear that the trucking company does not operate safely when there was nothing that the trucking company could do about that particular situation? Within that CSA program is the effort to operate the safety measurement system, which is a kind of a means of gauging high-risk carriers and the frequency with which they suffer, crashes. Because there is concern about the actual reliability of the data, Congress told the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to take that information off of its website, and FMCSA issued a public note on December 4th that it would do so. Note, however, that this is for property carriers. This is for trucking companies. This is not for buses. And you can see more about that if you wish to by looking at the link that's included there. In addition, for trucking companies, for bus companies that adopt technology that's designed to make them safer, for their efforts to basically improve their safety through their driver pool, there is now going to be an effort to try to make sure that the operator gets credit for doing that. Whether it's improving your SMS percentile or safety measurement system percentile or something else, DOT is supposed to report back to Congress on it. There is also going to be an effort to try to gauge preventable crashes in that program and make a better process available for the trucking companies and for the drivers to be able to have a gauge for how the system is operating and how they are being described. So the Motor Carrier Safety Advisory Committee is charged with basically developing a new process, and then DOT is supposed to be able to report to Congress. The whole goal is to more accurately address preventable crashes without kind of potentially putting somebody in a very awkward light for something that they could not have avoided, but it could affect their business and their operating. Congressman earlier discussed how there was an effort to address veterans issues in this bill, and as you can note here, there are several different things included. One is, for instance, to allow the military personnel to be able to rely upon where they received their DOT medical certification exam based on where the domicile is and whether they could do so through the Department of Veterans Affairs rather than having to go outside that process. There's also the military pilot program, which would allow drivers younger than perhaps is typically permitted to enter the driver pool for a commercial motor vehicle. There is slowly the gross vehicle weight limit of what is typically 80,000 pounds on the interstates is starting to ebb away. Individual states have addressed it. Vermont, as an example, did. Maine has as well. Now there is also starting to be some ebbing of that through this kind of a bill. If you are operating a natural gas vehicle, if you are towing a disabled vehicle, that kind of thing, there are going to be exceptions from the 80,000 pound limit, allowing you to exceed that depending upon the circumstances of what you're doing. The en route inspection of passenger commercial motor vehicles, basically when they pull the bus off and they perhaps even pull all the people off the bus, has been prohibited in this law. There is an hours of service exemption for ready-mix concrete delivery, and there's more of the kind of stuff associated with, for instance, trying to support the veterans. Oh, and one other note for the carriers on the phone, there is also the provision allowing companies to elect, if they wish to use hair samples for drug testing rather than relying on urinalysis. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has previously done things like issued guidance or it has issued exemptions. Congress is basically saying that they want to see that process get streamlined and improved, made more reliable, as an example. This is just a whole laundry list that FMCSA notes of all of the things that they now have to work on in order to be able to comply with what the FAST Act requirements are and to come out with rulemakings. And I will turn this back to Graham.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly so that we can get to our question and answer. Let me also point out that another there's at least a couple of other significant titles in the FAST Act that we're not even attempting to cover here because of the time constraints, including the hazardous materials, Chapter 51 reauthorization at PHMSA, and quite a bit of other rail infrastructure issues. Permit streamlining has been an emphasis of Congress since T21. There were major steps taken in Safe TLU to establish a permit streamlining regime and try and bring control of the project definition and alternatives analysis under a lead agency concept in NEPA in Safe TLU. Most of that basic structure that we saw in Safe TLU continues to be the framework of permit streamlining. There were some additional improvements made to that in MAP 21, and there's been further improvements on the acceleration of project delivery, a couple of which we mentioned in planning a minute ago, in the FAST Act. So the major themes that run through here is, one is emphasis on consolidating processes between agencies and a lead agency, an emphasis in many places of combining or consolidating environmental documents and review documents, and wherever possible establishing deadlines, and the concept of concurrence approval between participating agencies on a single consolidated review document. If we move to the next slide here. These are some new deadlines that have been established in the bill here. I will point out to everybody on the call, I'm sure you all know this from your personal experience, that deadlines in the law, while well-intentioned and while helpful, do not ensure compliance with the deadline. There's a fairly sophisticated regime that's been included here in the FAST Act under Subtitle C on permit streamlining to try and see an improved tempo. These deadlines here are a part of that, but they don't in and of themselves guarantee or ensure compliance with the timelines. It's just another tool that's being made available to try and make things move faster. Consolidation of NEPA documents here is another important step in that direction. Go to the next slide. Here's some more integration and adoption. As we said earlier, the activities that occur in planning, having standing in the NEPA process is another way, so that if you have to do some analysis of how many red salamanders are in a stream you want to build a bridge over in planning, you ought to conduct that review or that study at a level that's sufficient to have standing in NEPA, so you don't have to wait and do it again in NEPA. Next slide. These are additional planning activities that are trying to improve their standing in NEPA, give them standing in NEPA. Categorical exclusions, which is was really first introduced in the law here in a broad way in 221, extended in Safe TLU and MAP 21. We have further progress on that here, trying to expand the use of CEs to programmatic agreements so that these like projects can be approved en banc in a bulk instead of one by one. Next slide. Accelerated decision-making, environmental reviews, which is another series of deadlines and improvements. The engagement, which is between the state and federal, where you've got multiple layers of responsibility under a federal law, and improving how they interact with each other under deadlines, is also further fleshed out in FAST Act, which started, frankly, in Safe TLU. All of the delegation activities that we saw put in the law in Safe TLU and that were extended in MAP 21 stay in place here. If your state participating in one of these delegated programs, you've still got that authority, and some of that information sharing and training has been expanded to non-participating states. Next slide. One of the bigger changes here or additions to the concept of permit streamlining, and we're not going to get into a lot of detail on it here, we can at some later point, is the establishment of this Permitting Improvement Council. This is a fairly large and otherwise kind of complicated new piece of bureaucracy created for the purpose of being a policeman, ostensibly, in how individual federal agencies are proceeding with meeting deadlines otherwise included in the law for their activities, and whether they have a pattern of being slow on a particular kind of environmental review. Are they keeping pace with what other agencies, the time they take to complete a particular review? And the idea here is that this council is able to bring attention and guidance to those places in the federal regime that are slow or have a pattern of being slow. The jury is obviously out on how this ends up working, and does it actually bring the tempo improvements that are its intended consequence. Like any new regime, some folks have looked at this and said, well, this looks like another layer of bureaucracy that's going to could slow things down. Now, that's not its intent, to be sure. But until we see this up and running and it practiced, it's going to be hard to make a prediction about how much improvement it actually brings to permit streamlining and timing. I'll remain optimistic that it has the potential to do that, but I'll feel a lot better about it once we see it actually accomplishing some of those goals. Next slide. These are just some summaries of what we've talked about. Most of, we could just fast forward through these as we go along. This is basically large, kind of high altitude summary. of circumstances surrounding this bill that I think a lot of you guys are familiar with. We have a delta between what we bring in revenue and what we've got to invest in our infrastructure to keep our roads and other transportation infrastructure functioning correctly. The time between now and the next reauthorization, all of us, all stakeholders, have got to coalesce around a plan and make sure Congress passes it. On to the next slide. Probably what you all know here, the President's budget submitted a couple of weeks ago is not really making any breakthrough politically on solving these. We do not expect to see any of those proposals on transportation included in legislation this year. Next slide. So now we can, sorry we've gone over here. We'd like to have a Q&A if possible. The Q&A is very helpful for us in understanding what it is that is of interest to different folks here participating on this webinar. This is a huge jurisdiction. There's a lot of different issues we've skipped over. So any Q&A helps us kind of narrow down on what folks are interested in.
Thank you, Graham.
Seth has a plan.
Yep, we really appreciate y'all's time this afternoon. For the sake of time, we're going to shorten the Q&A portion. You actually answered a couple of questions that folks had emailed me while we were listening towards the end, focused around what the future looks like, particularly with the stability of the Highway Trust Fund. And you talked a little bit about that here just a minute ago in terms of folks coalescing around a plan. And I think we heard some comments from Congressman Woodall as well about their intention to go through a very deliberative process to arrive at some policy conclusions there. For those of you who have other questions, since we're over time, I would just ask you, please email those to me, smilliken@gatransportation.org. We'd love to have the opportunity to correspond with you directly and answer any questions you might have. GTA is going to be launching a new website over the next couple of weeks, and this webinar is going to be archived there. So you have the opportunity to go back and watch this again or share it around your networks for folks that may have questions about it generally. If you have issues that you'd like to see us delve into in more detail, please let us know that as well. We may plan a future webinar about that as well. And then finally, I'd let you guys know also that as we get ready to launch the new website, we're going to have a section devoted to the FAST Act, and we're going to be working with Graham and Tom and their team as regulatory rulings come out in summaries and different things like that. We're going to post those on our website so you'll have access to those and you can stay on top of what's coming out of the various agencies in terms of enforcement and delineating the details of how these things are going to work. So with that, I think that pretty much covers everything I had. I appreciate everybody's time today. Hopefully this has been a helpful exercise. Again, please touch base with us and let us know if there are other issues that you'd like to see us cover or specific questions arriving from the presentation today. And then we'll look forward to communicating with you in the coming months as we schedule more of these sessions for the rest of the year. So thank you very much for your time today, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.